what's your take on ApoB?
No, look, there have never in the entire history of human existence ever been experimental trial that was capable of showing a cause and effect relationship like a randomized control trial that has ever shown a cause and effect relationship between any form of cholesterol and cardiovascular disease. None. Not ApoB, not total cholesterol, not LDL, not SDLDL, not any of the different subfractions of LDL, nothing. And so you cannot say that there's a cause and effect relationship between these things. ApoB changes for all sorts of different reasons. ApoB 100 is a signaling molecule on LDL that the liver recognizes, so it can draw it back into the liver. So if you get it damaged through glycation, which is elevated blood sugar, because again, elevated blood sugar is toxic to the human body, which is what kills diabetics, and this damages LDL cholesterol, and this knocks off that ApoB 100. So now you have free ApoB floating around. Okay, so free ApoB floating around, is that bad? Yeah, of course it is. Is that because ApoB causes atherosclerosis and heart disease? Not necessarily. There's a glycation damaging process that's going on. You're glycating and damaging these LDL molecules, and you're knocking off ApoB, right? But the blood test that we have actually cannot distinguish between the ApoB that's been knocked off and damaged and free floating and the ApoB that's stuck onto a healthy, large, buoyant, fluffy LDL molecule that's perfectly normal and fine. So as your LDL goes up, your ApoB is going to go up. And it has nothing to do with saturated fat. Saturated fat, again, has nothing to do with serum levels of cholesterol or ApoB. That's actually well established, and even accepted. Again, U.S. dietary recommendations. They cite data showing that they're like, look, there's no reason to limit saturated fat because it has absolutely no bearing on serum cholesterol and absolutely no bearing on cardiovascular disease, except in a protective role, as we saw from JACC, the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. So ApoB is a very poor test because you don't know what you're looking at. It's also really just smoke. It's not the fire, right? Because if you do have free floating ApoB, it's because it's been knocked off through glycation. It's glycation that's the problem. There's a guy named Dr. Kraft who developed the Kraft test, which is a oral glucose tolerance test with insulin, looking at multiple times. So at time 0, 2 hours. You can check it at 5 hours as well, and you see how your body responds not only to that insult of glucose, but also how does your insulin respond, and do you have an appropriate insulin response, and does your glucose correspondingly go down when your insulin goes up? Are you insulin sensitive? And you see this. So Kraft, it was back in the 60s, he looked at something close to like 30,000 patients, and he did this for all this massive piece of work, and he found that there were only 5 patterns that emerged of how your body responds to glucose and insulin given this period of time and this test. And that he found that very early on, your body can start responding inappropriately to both glucose and insulin, showing that there's some sort of metabolic dysfunction. So early diabetes, pre-diabetes, whatever you want to call it, full-on diabetes, whatever. There's some sort of glucose and insulin issue and mismatch, and your body's just not able to metabolize these things properly. So if you call that point the point that diabetes is starting, call it pre-diabetes or whatever, but that's a point that it's starting to manifest. You're seeing this on these blood tests and on the Kraft OGTT, that 100% of the people in that group, out of nearly 30,000 people who had cardiovascular disease, had that dysfunction and early diabetes. And none of the people who didn't have that derangement in blood sugar and insulin had atherosclerosis or cardiovascular disease, basically. So it's the damage from the glucose that is damaging your vessels, causing damage, causing that lining to be damaged, and causing that to to form clots and damage and build up atherosclerosis and plaques and scarring, because that's trying to heal. It's healing damage. So if it wasn't damage in the first place, there wouldn't need to be any healing, and you wouldn't need to build up any plaques. Other things can damage the lining. Nicotine directly damages the artery linings, which is why smoking in any nicotine product is a risk for developing atherosclerosis and peripheral vascular disease. Homocysteine is also known to damage the artery lining, and that is an amino acid that is metabolized by B12. If you don't have enough B12, then you won't metabolize homocysteine properly. You get high levels of homocysteine and you start damaging your arteries. So there's all these different sorts of things. So, the thing with cholesterol, again, there's never been a high level experimental study that has ever shown a cause and effect relationship between any form of cholesterol and cardiovascular disease. And yet there have been at least 5 large-scale randomized controlled trials in humans with thousands of human subjects that have shown the opposite, that replacing animal fats with vegetable oils and polyunsaturated so-called heart-healthy fats and lowering cholesterol either had no benefit whatsoever to cardiovascular disease or caused more deaths from heart attacks and strokes, right? So what the hell are we doing here? Why aren't we teaching those in medical school? If there was robust data to show that cholesterol causes heart disease, why don't we use it? Why are we using observational studies like the Framingham study that said, oh, there's observation over time that people had higher levels of cholesterol, had higher levels of cardiovascular disease? Well, that's what was taught to me in medical school. That's what taught to most people in medical school. And we just take it at face value. Oh, okay, I guess, yeah, well, everyone knows cholesterol causes heart disease. That doesn't show a cause and effect relationship. That's an association. Associations cannot, by definition and terms, show a cause and effect relationship. It cannot. That's definitional. And so, and the other side of it is that the actual Framingham study was actually misrepresented. The original data showed the opposite, showed actually lowering cholesterol actually increased death from cardiovascular disease. And it was misrepresented by the American Heart Association, who again is in the published literature and in newspapers, having been taking bribes from sugar companies and Procter & Gamble and other sorts of industries for years to push forward whatever the hell they want. Procter & Gamble made a product called Crisco. Crisco is hydrogenated vegetable oil. And vegetable oil is an industrial product that was used in the Industrial Revolution. And hydrogenating this made a thicker, more viscous oil that was used to lubricate big, heavy machinery like tanks and submarines in the German army. The German army actually developed hydrogenation of vegetable oil and made this product. And Procter & Gamble bought that technology from the German military in 1911. And then put this product out and just started feeding it to people and calling it Crisco. And they paid Procter & Gamble the equivalent of $20 million to lie and say that Crisco was good for your heart and that butter and lard were bad for your heart. This is the origins of the good fats and bad fats and heart-healthy plant oils and, bad for your heart, animal fats. It's lie. It's a complete lie. It's published. It's well documented. And yet we're still calling this heart healthy fat. No, of course it's not. It kills people. I mean, that's what the randomized control trials say. And people say, well, these things are flawed because of this. Name one randomized control trial in humans showing that replacing animal fat with so-called heart-healthy vegetable oil and lowering LDL and total cholesterol, and ApoB, by the way, that would have gone down too in those studies, shows a cause and effect relationship between cholesterol and heart disease. There are none. None exist on this earth. If there were, they'd be talking about it. There are none. Has anybody ever said any to you? No, because there are none. There's absolutely none. So they talk about these observational studies. They talk about the nurses study, which is like they give these people like a food questionnaire once a year and say, hey, what'd you eat last year? Like, what the hell are you talking about? What I eat last year? You're going to remember every single meal you've ever eaten? Like, give me a break. If they were serious about this, they'd say, hey, here's a log. Keep track of all the meals you're going to have this year. If they were serious about this, which they're not, they want to be able to have garbage data that they can manipulate to look any way they want. Because, well, we were going to correct for this, because of course they have incomplete data. What does incomplete data mean? It means it's garbage. It's no good, right? So they correct for things and they adjust for things. They lie and make things up, basically. And they say, and they manipulate that data in any way they want. They correct it, meaning that they manipulate the data. They change the data. They change the outcomes to fit anything that they want. And now maybe they do that in an honest way, but maybe they don't. And either way, they're manipulating the data. They're changing it. And the fact of the matter is, the people that do this, like Professor Walter Willett at Harvard, they're vegan activists. They're open vegan activists. And so of course they're biased. Of course they're not going to do this in an unbiased sort of way. And it's rife for bias, because it's a garbage way of collecting data. And so they're saying, well, no, this shows such good. No, it doesn't. It's garbage. It's not even good observational data. Like if you go to the Maasai in Tanzania and Kenya, and you see that they are the tallest human beings alive on earth. They're extremely healthy. They don't get any of these diseases, modern diseases of civilization. They only eat, blood, meat, and milk. And they're crazy healthy, perfect teeth, bleach white. They don't have dentists and orthodontists or anything like that. They're fabulously healthy. And then their neighbors, the Akikuyu, who are alive at the same time in the same area, they interbreed, so they're genetically similar. And they're largely plant-based, whole food, plant-based, grow their own stuff, right? No pesticides or anything. And the Akikuyu, who are of genetically the same stock, 5 inches shorter, smaller brains, smaller jaws, crooked teeth, poor dentition, multiple health issues, many chronic diseases, and nutritional deficiencies. And even when you correct those nutritional deficiencies, they don't actually improve their health. It's only when you replace the plants they're eating with meat that they actually get better. That was a large-scale observational study done by the British in the 1920s. And that was published in 1931. It was 170 pages long. Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor at Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys. So what about that study? That's a real observational study where they're looking at very specific things going on. They're not cherry picking things and correcting the data and fudging things and saying, hey, why don't you fill this out and just tell me this and send it back? There are levels of quality for observational studies. And the nurses trial and these food frequency questionnaires, which is what they're called, are garbage. They're just complete and utter garbage. And they can be manipulated and changed in so many different ways. You could do them fairly well, but this is not a good example of that. But you have other observational studies that are far better. You have, people say that, well, the data about the fossil record about, how humans have been, eating for millions of years, that's observational. Well, no, not really, because, we have scientific, information looking at the stable isotope picture, where we can actually tell what animals were eating at certain times, and what if they were had different sort of levels of carnivory. They were eating more animals or less animals or more plants, or actually eating animals that ate animals that ate animals that ate plants, or just eating animals that ate plants, for instance, higher up on the food chain, for example. You can actually tell that through scientific endeavor, and so that's not the same as like handing out a flyer and saying, hey, can you remember every meal that you ate in the last 2 years? Completely different things. And either way, it's observational. The only experimental data shows that cholesterol is absolutely not a problem. The only experimental data shows that saturated fat is not a problem, and in fact is beneficial in a number of different ways. So it just is flat out against the literature and against well-known scientific experiments. In another way, like they did in the supernova trial, where they took ketogenic athletes and they said, okay, you go, or they took athletes and said, okay, you drop the carbs, go keto. But they only gave them 2 weeks, and then they tested them sort of, very quickly after, a couple of weeks. They also didn't